Hi everybody, my name is Sue Lownsbrough and I have been fortunate in mentoring two fabulous projects. The first one is Emojis, which was run by Kendal College and South Lakeland Adult and Community. And the second one is planning, writing in vocational areas, which was run by Lakes College, also in Cumbria. So without further ado, I will hand over to the project lead for Kendal and South Lakeland, Tina Alderson, and she can introduce her team.
Thank you, Sue. So welcome to Emojis in English and ESOL, a learner-led inclusive approach that engages learners and helps them make progress in GCSE functional skills and English for speakers of other languages. So please use the Zoom chat for questions about the project as we progress through the presentation. The emoji strategy is adaptable to online learning. For contact during or after the presentation, please see the links below. So, many learners come to further education without achieving their GCSE grade 4. Often they are reluctant to engage with reading, writing and planning. Similarly, ESOL learners can struggle to learn enough vocabulary to communicate. Therefore, the Emojis in English and ESOL strategy was designed to reignite learners' motivation and engagement through the universal language of emojis. The universal languages of emojis provided a fun, familiar, relatable platform and it's promoted inclusivity. Encouraging learners to use their own bank of emojis motivated them to start reading, which built their confidence. Developing learners' understanding of the text was transferred to their writing and planning. Historically, learners studying English in further education are reluctant to read, and this is one of the biggest challenges for GCSE and functional tutors. Work completed by the learners taking part in the project showed they had read and understood the text. I would like to welcome Jane Dotchin, who will showcase how we engage the reluctant reader.
Thank you, Tina. Hello, everybody. I'm talking about the use of emojis with my GCSE RESIT group's approach to the reading paper. Everybody's starting point was a grade 3. Initially, learners, I found, were reluctant to text mark or recognise its usefulness at drawing out ideas in the text. They saw it as time-consuming and not marked by the examiner anyway. With practice, they recognised that emojis for text annotations were an easier starting point than words. And you can see the diagram on the slide there, where emojis were used to track thoughts, responses, feelings and ideas of the writer, the characters within the text and the reader. Some learners who enjoyed doodling took to using the emojis immediately. My particular case study learner said that emojis were very natural in her everyday life and texting, but they're meant to be used by hand. And drawing emojis was sometimes problematic. The intention might be to draw an emoji indicating surprise, but the result might be indicating evil because it's all in the eyebrows. However, as long as the learner understood their own annotations, everything was fine. During lockdown online learning, inserting emojis into a text via the emoji keyboard was successful. And also, if you hover over the emoji with the mouse, it also provides vocabulary to indicate the emotion. And so this further developed learners' vocabulary. When we were back in the classroom, we changed the emphasis to developing emojis into written notes. And we were also back to drawing emojis, this time without complaint that they should be used digitally only. They were using emojis less now as the emojis led them to text annotation and notes. And this was real progress because originally they were very reluctant to annotate at all. My case study learner said putting a keyword next to the emoji helped better. And they said thinking of the right emoji could be difficult, but this made words pop into their heads instead. The learner's ending point was certainly clear engagement with reading the text, and all my learners in this particular group achieved a grade 4 or 5 in the teacher assessed grades. Using the emojis to develop understanding of the text, we also transferred to writing, and you can see on the diagram in the slide there a plan which shows a continuation of the text that they were annotating. And now I'd like to introduce Carly Cahoon, who's a functional skills tutor, and she'll share with you the success of using emojis and planning and writing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Morning, everyone. Yeah, so like Jane sort of said already, once we had developed the use of the emojis within our sessions as a fun and relatable platform, we then developed their understanding of text further by transferring this to writing skills. So we did this for both GCSE and functional skill groups. And we particularly focused on the planning process, as that's something that learners are often reluctant again to do. And we thought that, you know, if you can plan effectively, it has a huge impact on the quality of the piece of writing that a learner will produce. So how we did this was that at the beginning of a task, learners were asked to draw an emoji to represent the overall message that they wanted to convey in their piece of writing. So often, you know, it could be happy, sad, angry. They could then expand on this by adding in some examples of words, language features and phrases that they could use to help convey this tone that were linked to the topic. So for example, if they were asked to write a letter to the council complaining about the noise levels on their street, then what language might they use to convey this message? So we teased that out of them first, using the emoji as a starting point. This process gave learners time to expand their vocabulary using mind maps or bullet points, so that they could then piece together their notes to form a developed piece of writing that had a clear structure. We found that this really supported learners with a way into beginning a piece of writing, and it helped them to expand and strengthen their ideas enough to meet the criteria for both GCSE, level 1 and 2 awarding body and workplace criteria. So it was really successful. In a similar way, learners were then asked to reread the text after they'd written it and annotate it using the emoji to identify where they had used emotive or persuasive language. And that meant that they could then clearly see where they had or hadn't used these creatively, and they could go back in and expand their sentences further and add more depth to the writing. So this formative assessment was particularly useful to learners, and it empowered them to progress because it gave them the skills that they needed to be able to see where improvements could be made. I think the main impact that we took from using the emoji in English approach, when looking at writing skills especially, was the increase in engagement and motivation. So my learners commented that because it was a different way to approaching the task, it was also something that was familiar to them, and it provided a temporary scaffold and prevented that feeling of like, oh gosh, where do I even start with this task? We did find, like similarly to Jane said with reading, that as the learners progressed, they no longer needed the emoji and it had done its job. So that was brilliant, it was successful. Yeah, so we also looked at this with ESOL learners. They embraced the use of emojis also. So I would like to introduce Neil Stanley, who will share with you how they use emoji to support the development of vocabulary. Thank you.
Thanks, Carly. I've sort of come at this from an English teacher's perspective, but also actually also as a teacher of Spanish. And in addition to teaching beginner Spanish, I'm also learning Spanish. So I have this sort of dual perspective on the process of learning vocabulary. Our ESOL learners regularly review their progress, and a perennial challenge for them was broadening their English vocabulary. So over my years of teaching ESOL, I've used a whole variety of different approaches to help learners broaden their word knowledge, from flashcards and picture-to-word activities, realia, songs. I've used body language. I've highlighted new vocabulary and reading activities. I've used a massive online resources. But something I'd never used before this year was an emoji to teach vocabulary. And under Tina Alderson's guidance, my colleague Chris Fonth and I set out to see what mileage there was in this approach, and we really found there was plenty of mileage. So we started with an initial assessment, and you can see one of those on the slide, to measure what was new at the outset. The one on the left of the slide is one of my entry 3 learners. Chris, who you're going to hear from in a minute, worked with pre-entry group of refugees. And what then followed was a sort of a journey of discovery, really, where the learners were asking the questions and making the links between the emojis and the words that they started to link to them. Our pattern was to examine an emoji, for instance, the smiley face with the heart-shaped eyes, and then through a number of related activities, try to identify and tease out related words. So activities included reading an extract from a romantic novel, a speaking and listening activity based on sort of let's talk about love conversation cards, etc., etc. And the emphasis was to encourage learners to use the vocabulary in context. A few lessons later, I would then check what they still remembered. And the discussions generated by the emojis and the words associated with them was an incredibly sort of rich source of learning. So as well as learners developing synonyms of, you know, happiness and sadness and shock and cheek, seeing how some of the words researched would be used in different contexts, for example, formal or informal, or written and spoken English. And they were encouraged to experiment with the effect of substituting one word for another with a similar meaning, and asked if it carries exactly the same meaning or whether it results in a subtle change. Another example of this rich discussion related to the smiley face with the halo emoji. So working in small groups, the learners brainstormed words associated with that one and came up with, you know, the ones you'd sort of expect them to come up, like kindness and angelic and blessing. But they then went on to a discussion about decency, and even used the word integrity. How is this different to probity? They then asked me. This debate showed how they were engaging with the whole idea of synonyms and closely related vocabulary, prompted just by one single emoji. Now, I could finish by telling you sort of the percentage increase in vocabulary at the end of the project, but read the report if you'd like to know that. Instead, I'd urge you to explore the use and benefits of emojis in your own teaching, because I was using them and you may be too. So I'd now like to introduce my colleague Chris Fonth, who's going to share with you how his learners benefited from the use of emojis in English and ESOL. Over to you, Chris.
Neil. So I teach refugees ESOL. And my plan with this project was to find out whether emojis could help these lower level, these pre-entry learners to articulate their feelings better. And as a result of that, integrate into society here in Britain more easily. So during that same initial assessment that you saw with Neil's slide, my learners produced an average of just 23 associated emotional words. So the ones you might expect, like happy, sad, angry, scared, the kind of simple emotions, which, you know, was pretty good. I was pleased with. Then, over a series of lessons, we tried to increase their vocabulary of these type of words linked to the emojis that we used. So we did call and response activities, translation activities into mainly Arabic, role play scenarios to model the emotions and how they might be used in real life, how they might come up in their life here, memory games to help with the retention of the new vocab, speaking activities to use the new words, and finally, facial expression and body language that goes with these emotions to develop cultural awareness of non-verbal communication. So on the slide, hopefully you can see one of the learners there trying to remember 3 words that are associated with this particular sad face emoji. And you can see, if you look at her, she's also practicing her disappointed face. Later on, the learners applied this new vocabulary by writing short recounts. Some wrote about their first English test that they did with me, others about a special day. And one learner wrote a particularly poignant and memorable recount of his journey to the UK from Syria via Lebanon through refugee camps. So that was great. And he said that these emojis really helped him to remember the words that he needed to use in his recount. Like worried, nervous, frightened, motivated, relieved, and grateful. So by the end of the project, this group of learners knew an average of 46 emotional words, as opposed to the 26 at the beginning. So almost doubling their word power. So that was a great outcome. Shortly after, 80% of this class passed their first English test, this pre-entry ESOL assessment, which was great news. And speaking to them, they said that they really felt like this project had helped them to communicate better with people here, their neighbours, their friends, and to help them integrate. So they really enjoyed the project, they really benefited from it, and I think it's been a great thing for them to help them integrate into society here. I'll hand back to Tina now, who will share further on the impact the emoji had on the learners' inclusive journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We all found that by consulting with learners about the approach throughout the project, it motivated and empowered them so much that they were confident to decide when they no longer needed the emoji scaffold to complete a task. Learner curiosity and confidence grew. Below are a few examples of the impact the emoji had on their learning journey. Engagement. Are we doing the emoji thing again today? Empowerment. I feel it's a lot easier to understand than when I was at school. I really wish schools will start to use this method, not just because it helped with my reading, but also my writing and speaking and listening. They were also motivated. I got a job as a care assistant. Sometimes I didn't believe in myself enough, but thanks to you, I gained confidence because I got a lot out of your lessons. It is amazing how interesting your lessons always are. It makes me want to learn. Further feedback from learners will be able to be found on Claire's page and on the Wakelet. So in a COVID climate where learners nationally experienced lost learning, the use of the emoji has shown how engaging with learners' literacy practices is an invaluable tool in the classroom. Would you all please indicate your reflection by using the Zoom reaction button and the chat for feedback? And while you do so, I would just like to share Jane Dotchin's GCSE learners' feedback. The emoji project has helped me to understand English. It helped me to understand how a character is feeling in the text and be able to write a relevant response. It's very natural for me to use emojis in my everyday life when I'm texting people, so I already have, or rather I already knew what they all mean. I have got more ticks in my work than I've ever got in my life. I wish they did this in my secondary school, otherwise I might have passed it first time. We would love you to trial this strategy and feedback, as we believe this will support learners to re-engage and motivate progression, addressing lost learning. Thank you. I will now take the first question, Sue.
Super. Has anybody got any questions they would like to ask anybody in the team, either from a particular aspect, ESOL, functional skills, or GCSE, or just overall about the project? I've got one question that I know the answer to, but I'd just like to share it with everybody else who's there. So one of the things that struck me about this project, which was an unintended outcome, you decided to use emojis so you could get learners to identify different emotive language used in a text and what have you. But one of the unintended outcomes of it was that where learners previously were reluctant to read anything, that reluctance just evaporated, didn't it, Tina? Do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Oh, it was absolutely unbelievable. Thank you, Sue. So previously, learners would be faced with a piece of text, or in some cases too, if it was GCSE, and they just looked at it and, gosh, they were overwhelmed with the black writing on a white page and didn't know where to start. But once we asked them to use their universal understanding of emojis, they quite quickly drew or annotated online an emoji to either a sentence or a paragraph, and then quite quickly they had their own roadmap of understanding. So subconsciously they were engaging with text, they were reading, they were grasping understanding, they were learning new grammar, they were grabbing the author's point of view, and that they were then making judgments that they were able to analyse and respond to questions within the text. It just blew our mind away that it was something that they wanted to grab hold of and run with. And the learners led their progression. We just acted as facilitators. It was wonderful to see. Thank you.
Can I just ask, I think that's absolutely fantastic. So many different ideas. I'm bowled over by it. The different presenters, you're obviously looking at in terms of reading and writing and assessment. Did you plan together in the first instance, or did you sort of decide to take it on board different and then come together at different stages throughout the research?
So what we did was I met with Richard Foster from Cumbria County Council, South Lakes Community Learning. I put a proposal together. We asked them if they wanted to come on board, looking at it from an ESOL vocabulary point of view. And Hayley Chapman ran with the project. She thought it was amazing. So what we did quite quickly was we put up a page on Teams. We met monthly. We discussed weekly anything that we needed to do. And oh gosh, the collaboration was amazing, and we just fed backwards and forwards with the journeys that the learners were taking us. Is there anything you guys would like to share? Carly, Jane, Chris, Neil?
I think another good thing that about it was that we all we individually made our own resources, didn't we? You know, because we had different classes and we had different approaches. So I made my resources for my classes and to see how that went, but then they were shared with everybody else if they wanted to use them, and Carly did the same. So yes, we did all have our own ideas and ran with them in our own way, which I think is answering the question that was asked.
Great, thank you.
I'm just, Ruth, do you want to ask a question as well?
Yes, please. Thank you. I think you've just answered it. So were your students all using Teams for their emojis, or was it Google Classroom or another platform?
It was Teams.
Okay.
But in the classroom, they were handwriting them. They were drawing them.
Okay. Thank you. And I'd just like to make a comment that I've really enjoyed your presentation, and I think this has great potential in lots of education providers. And I love the way that it cuts across different levels of English, from entry-level English to functional skills to GCSE, and also for ESOL as well. And yeah, so well done on choosing a project that really incorporates benefits so many different subject areas and levels.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Sonia as well, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, my question is, and I'm very interested in this kind of approach using images. Do you think that learners who have kind of different ways of learning would benefit? And it's not just in English and maths, I think, to be honest. It's about people having diverse needs when they are engaging with written text or producing it themselves. Did any of your learners have different ways of learning, and could you see the effect of using these images was helpful for them?
Thank you. Jane, would you like to contribute?
Yeah, the learners did use them differently. The thing about all the learners was that they all used emojis anyway. And so that was like a revelation to me, because I'm not an emoji user, or I wasn't. And so because they used them already, that, you know, somebody would send them a text, or they would read something on Facebook and they would respond to it with an emoji. But some students really enjoyed writing and doodling them. Some students preferred it when we were online and inserting emojis into texts. Some students added other symbols and drawings. Some students used words as well. And then some students started getting rid of the emojis. They might think of one in their head, but they'd write the words down instead. So they did all use them in different ways. And another thing that we found is it's difficult to read other people's emojis. It's something that's it's difficult to read another person's mind map, isn't it? Or another person's annotations. So it was a very personal, individual experience I found with my students.
Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious of time. We've got another presentation to do before past. If you've got any further questions, can I ask you to pop them in chat, and the team will try and answer them via chat for you. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. You've done a brilliant job. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Michelle and Rebecca from Lakes College, also in Cumbria. And their project was about helping learners to transfer their writing skills from a GCSE classroom into a vocational environment. So I'll hand over to them now. Thank you.
Sorry, we're just quickly setting up. It'll be 2 minutes, hopefully. Slideshow. Oh yeah, that worked. Can we just check, can everyone see our screen? Because we now can't see our screen.
Yeah, we can see it, Michelle.
Fabulous.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Sue.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm Michelle. This is Rebecca.
Hiya.
We've been working on the project about developing writing, but trying to develop writing and planning outside of the field of English through into vocational areas throughout the college. So what we'd found from previous OTLA projects was that learners weren't always necessarily identifying where they were planning, particularly with vocational assignments or life experiences. So we kind of wanted to hone in on that a little bit and to be able to develop that across the college. So that's why this year we'd looked at doing that, and we'd wanted to work with a particular team to help them to make those links between what they actually already did know about planning and what they already did know about writing, and linking some of their English skills then back into their other assignments and experiences in their other studies. So we worked originally with our level 3 public service students, and well, actually they'd approached us and said our students are really struggling with planning to write reports. So obviously, as we do, we jump on it and we're like, right, we know something that we can do with that, and got involved. But it was great for us actually to be able to go out into the wider world and see how some of the learners that we work with in GCSE or functional skills, how they behave and how they react and how they study and learn outside of our classroom and with others. So we wanted to help them to make those links. Much like everybody else, we've had to make adaptations and be reactive to situations. So Rebecca and our team were primarily working off-site. So we had to think way around things like that, as well as everything else that's going on. So I'll hand over to Rebecca to tell you a bit more about the day-to-day stuff.
Okay, so how we ended up doing it. So the project almost had two separate halves, if you like. So from maybe October time till Christmas, as Michelle's already touched on, we're in public services. And so because they'd approached us, we asked for a specific task that they were going to be doing. So this is one of their vocational assignments. And I took the title of that and all the different sections and just literally put it onto a mind map, gave the students the mind map and said, right, what are your initial ideas to put in your report? And then from there, we gave them their own individual kind of structure, if you like, where they had to jot down from those ideas which ones they were going to link together and how they were going to make it into a coherent and cohesive structure. So still using those GCSE skills, but in their vocational coursework. And then from after Christmas until the end of the year, we then switched that and went back into our GCSE classes and made sure that what we were teaching in public services was replicated in GCSE as well, so that the learners were getting it from both sides, where we were teaching the same public services learners, and also that the rest of our learners had the opportunity to learn how to plan. Because before this project, quite often I've noticed in my own classes, if I'd say to a learner, oh, do you want to make a plan? No, Rebecca, I don't plan. I don't like doing that. I'll just go straight away. And then the learners would often run out of ideas, or it maybe would be in a different order and need correcting to be in an order that made sense, or would just run out of steam and not hit the word count were our three biggest issues, if you like. So then we did the same kind of idea with the mind map, because as Michelle said, we were off site, we were using Microsoft Whiteboard to do this, and we've got a little activity to show you this behind the scenes with that. So got the main topic, which was discovery. We were writing a story about discovering something. The whole class were asked on Canvas what kind of discoveries could be made. We had loads of different ideas, and then the learners picked their own idea and again planned that more in detail, working out how they were going to structure their paragraphs and making sure they had enough content to fit 6 paragraphs. And what we learned from that, if I just quickly move on my slides and come back, was that it helped our learners to definitely reach the word count, but also saw an improvement in scores. So if you want to go away and read our reports after this, you'll see in the appendices there's a lot about learners' journeys and examples of work from before they started planning, so a bit of work that they hadn't done a plan for, and then work afterwards as well. And there's one particular student that I have in mind who would write these stories and it'd be like 15 pages long. They were novels essentially, and they'd have loads and loads of ideas. It was just getting that structure and kind of containing themselves, because obviously in a GCSE exam you only have 45 minutes to write, and you're not going to be able to replicate that 15 pages in the actual assessment. So for her it was narrowing down the ideas. For another one of the students it was making sure that they had enough of an idea to be able to write 6 paragraphs on it and not kind of run out of steam after paragraph 3 and not write enough in order to gain as many marks as possible. So that was maybe the biggest tangible impact on our learners. Another impact that we found was just better engagement, maybe less reluctance even to planning. having that modelling about how to plan, rather than me just saying do a plan, being actually taught how to do that, I think helped some learners. It made it more of a routine. Like we're doing question 5, so first we're going to plan, really helped my learners do that and kind of take away the freedom that I suppose I was giving them beforehand of, oh, why don't you write a plan? It was, right, we're going to write a plan first before we start. Michelle, do you like?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're talking about the impact on learners, which is obviously massively important, but actually one of the biggest things we've taken away from this year is the impact it's had on us as practitioners, us as people, but actually the influence it's had across the organisation. So some of the things that's kind of come off the back of this really is we're restructuring how we are teaching, I suppose, our SOLs and our schemes of work, to be able to bring in more planning to write in the early days when learners are coming in. Doesn't matter what level they're doing, but they're all having that as a skill to be taught and learned and developed in its own right, and that's gone across the whole of the English team, which will then, we're hoping will go bigger, and will go bigger actually, because I'm quite bossy on it. I think it's really, really important, particularly with the transfer of the skills learners are using in vocational. So with the T levels particularly, I know that's some difficulties or challenges that can come from that. So I think this is one of the things that we're doing to try and help with those English skills and writing skills that those particular learners would have. We're in the process at the moment, as things have quietened down a little, of collating texts from vocational areas so that we can see what they're working with and how we can help them to develop with it. We've restructured our timetable so that we've got practitioners working with particular areas so that they can kind of develop those planning to write skills within our own classes, but then also out into their vocational areas. Yeah, so it's been a big impact on us as much as anybody else. Do you want any questions, or is there anything else you'd like to add, Rebecca?
Yeah, shall we just say any questions?
Thank you. I've got an observation, if I may, that may stimulate some questions or thought. Some things that struck me over the period of this project were that learners were not aware that what they were learning in a GCSE English class or even a functional skills class were skills that can be taken and used in a whole range of other areas. And I think what you have highlighted is that is something that the English tutor needs to take on board as their role while they're teaching GCSE English and functional skills English. And as you said, they're introducing, you know, the topic of T levels and what have you. There's going to be some quite challenging demands for learners who are enrolling on T levels, who are going to need to take these skills from their GCSE classes and apply them in work, real life contexts and what have you. So that was one of the things that struck me. But the other thing that struck me as well was your shifting your relationship with your vocational tutors and your recognition that in breaking down that barrier to show learners that they can apply their English skills in a wide range of situations, was to take texts from a vocational area and use them to teach the underpinning skills in GCSE. So whichever part of the GCSE that you were teaching at that time, there is something that you can take from a vocational area and use that to teach that skill, and then move it on to, well, how would we use this in a GCSE? So I thought that was quite useful. I don't know if you've got any comments on that.
No, I've got comments. I think there's been a real positive, I think, come out of this whole project in that sense. And I think it's given us a bit of courage to go out there and say, actually, give us what you've got, let us work with what you've got, and let us help to make those links between the writing and planning skills so that they can kind of take them further on. And it's kind of pleasing to see how big that's getting, I suppose, as an organisation, actually.
Yeah.
It's quite a positive thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question. Well, it's not a quick question. It's probably going to ask you to crystallise a whole year of work in a single sentence. So apologies if I put you on the spot. Michelle and Rebecca, what would you say you know now that you didn't know this time last year?
Plan better.
Okay, so tell me more about that. Do you mean plan better as teachers, or that learners need to be taught to plan better?
A bit of both, actually, Claire, because I think obviously Rebecca and I were left loose to take on with this as a part of our own professional development, so kind of homing in on some skills early on. But yes, you're right, I don't think necessarily all learners do know how to plan well, and I think that's probably a key skill both for their English but life experiences and their learning. So yes, I do think it's a skill they need to be taught in order to be able to then go out and do it themselves. Yeah.
It's critical. Sue, I can see you've got your hand up too.
If you asked me the same question, Claire, what I would say about both projects, the Emojis and the planning in vocational areas, is what English teachers can achieve by stepping outside their GCSE zone and walking in learners' shoes for a little while and taking on board learners' points of view and experiences to realign how they actually teach GCSE and functional skills and ESOL.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree with you there, Sue, wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
I would like to lead some applause, if I may. I'll let you finish off, Sue, but before we do, it's inspirational to hear you talk about all that you've done, both projects, and actually they link together, don't they? There could be some real coming together of what you've learned. So I start a round of applause because I just think it's been so fascinating.
I'd just like to follow on from that and say it's been an absolute delight working with all three organisations. So thank you very much, Claire, for giving me that opportunity, and thank you to all the teams who I've worked with for making this such a joy for me, and good luck moving forward.
Same back to you, Sue, for all the support.
Thank you so much, Sue.